Hello everyone, it's been a long time. The other day I was thinking to myself, man, if there's one thing that parents of kids with FASDs and challenging behaviors need right now, it's being forced to stay at home unexpectedly for several weeks due to a pandemic. That'll improve things. Seriously though, things are going to be tough for the majority of people who watch this channel. For some of you, even if school isn't the best place for your child to be at every day, it was something that provided at least a little bit of structure and, perhaps most importantly, time out of the house. For many of the parents that I work with, school time was the only time they had to focus on things that they needed to get done or in getting any kind of rest or relaxation. Many of you may have to work from home or maybe even leave your job altogether. And that's going to be tough when you're supporting a kid who could easily be struggling with all that's going on. All this to say, everybody's situation is different, and it's important that we support each other as much as we can right now. If you haven't already done so, maybe consider joining an online FASD or challenging behavior support group. Keep getting ideas, and keep remembering that despite how difficult things can get with our kids, it's a brain thing, and most of the time, they're acting exactly how we would expect kids with disabilities, sensory issues, or trauma to act in these circumstances. It may seem to you like your kid is the only one like this, but trust me, you are not alone, and the behaviors that you're seeing are the behaviors that many other parents are seeing as well. And before we get started, I just want to quickly remind you that we're going to be doing a book club on the It's a Brain Thing podcast. So if you haven't already, make sure that you order your book of Beyond Behaviors by Dr. Mona Delahook. This book is amazing and is, in my opinion, the key to helping kids with trauma, developmental disabilities, and challenging behaviors make improvements in a brain-based, compassionate way. Dr. Delahook isn't going to waste our time recommending things that we know do not work for these kids, which I know is a frustration for many of you trying to find professional support for your child. I also am going to recommend that you get the physical version of the book, since it does have worksheets that we're going to be filling out and looking at together. I'll put a link to the book on Amazon in the video description, as well as a link to the It's a Brain Thing podcast, which is where we will be doing the book club. To prepare for this video, I asked my Facebook audience and a few parent support groups what they've done or plan to do to prepare for having the kids home every day. There were a lot of great responses, and of course, what works for some people won't work for everyone. We have to individualize supports for the specific needs of each of our kids. First, I want to highlight 2 free booklets that were made by FASD-UK. The first is specifically about COVID-19 and was adapted from Public Health England by FASD-UK in order to make it easier for people with FASDs to process and to understand. It goes over various subjects, including how to properly wash your hands, why it's important that we all take steps to sanitize and isolate, what to expect if you catch COVID-19, tips for accessing health services in the UK, and a list to help us make plans with the person on how to prepare or how to cope. It's definitely important that you read over the booklet first, because some kids might be especially anxious about some of the information. You can just leave those pages out or use the booklet as a guide for your own discussions, visuals, and supports. The second booklet by FASD-UK is a stay-at-home guide for kids with FASDs. It allows us to brainstorm various supports and plans with our kids that are related to being at home. It helps them and us start thinking more proactively about what they're going to need each day. So for example, there are sections on thinking about what activities can help our bodies, thinking about what we would need to make a calm space, putting together a schedule, and even some cutouts that you can use to make things more visual. And thanks to FASD-UK for making these available. One of the most important things you want to make sure that you do is to connect with your child at least once a day. This is especially important if you have a kid who's often dysregulated, oppositional, or who's been through trauma or ongoing stress. You need to find an activity that you guys can do together that you both enjoy and where there aren't too many expectations that can cause an issue and then a stress response during a time where we're trying to connect. Some parents told me that they're doing crafts together, going to parks as long as it's safe, and trying out cooking together. Connecting needs to happen for a lot of reasons that are both related and unrelated to COVID-19. Now, some kids are struggling with washing their hands. Maybe they've always hated doing it, maybe they're just all washed out, maybe they're oppositional in general, and let's face it, we're asking their brains to shift and be more attentive to a random aspect of life, hand washing, which we know that kind of attentiveness demands the very skills that people with FASDs struggle with. One great resource someone posted was a video by Kelly Rose Sarno, which showed her teaching her kid about germs using pepper and soap. I really like this because it takes the conversation from the verbal and abstract to the visual and concrete, exactly what people with FASDs typically need. You can find a link to this video in the video description. Several parents mentioned how they're dealing with hand washing. Many, of course, are singing songs while washing with their kids to help with things like attention span, initiation, and time perception. Others are putting hand washing times in the routine, which helps to ensure that hand washing gets done and can help with skills like transitioning or initiation. Some parents are using visual transitions instead of verbal prompts when it's time to actually wash hands. This might help to decrease some opposition and help with transitionings and memory as well. One parent mentioned that seeing some news about the virus helped reinforce the importance of why we need to take hand washing seriously, or why we need to socially distance ourselves from our friends. Sometimes hearing new and abstract concepts from someone other than a parent can definitely be effective in helping something sink in. However, other kids are likely already anxious, so we want to avoid watching or listening to news about the virus where they can see it and hear it. Ongoing stress is really the last thing that we need right now, so if turning off the news helps to decrease it, that's what we should do. A lot of us aren't hugging or touching right now. If being reminded not to hug is going to cause stress or hurt feelings, can we ask the person how they want us to remind them? It's a brain thing, and they might impulsively go and hug someone that needs space, so we want to be more casual about it and make it about finding a solution to help their brain remember. Of course, we want to practice ahead of time versus just telling them verbally, because practicing, again, takes things out of the verbal and abstract and into the more practical and concrete. Of course, it's going to be important that there's some kind of predictability or structure in place. This is really essential for everyone, not just our kids. Structure is an element that really has to be individualized for everyone as well. So we have to consider the needs and limits of our own child, the needs and limits of any other child living in the home, and of course consider our own needs and limits as parents. Generally speaking, routine is all the more important when we're working with multiple kids. So most of you will need to find a balance of keeping enough of the day structured and predictable with being flexible enough to ensure that our kids can stay regulated. There's really so many things that can make things potentially go south. We don't want to stand on the principle of a strict routine if the house is burning down around us. Kids with sensory issues, executive functioning struggles, and trauma will need adults to connect with them as much as possible. And it's hard to do that if we're frequently power struggling over routine and expectations. Remind yourself each day that you're going to need to be okay with adjusting things, and do this before you're actually in a situation where you need to do so. This can actually help you in the moment think about things a little bit more clearly and to remove any initial emotions that you have about it away. Some children do well with tightly packed schedules, but many don't. As a parent pointed out in our online discussion, some kids need us to limit the number of transitions they have, which might mean fewer activities. We also want to make sure that we're allowing for time outside, so long as it's safe to do so, and we want to keep an eye on our kids' executive functioning fuel. I'll put a link to executive functioning fuel information in the description to this video. Sticking to our routine and schedule topic, let's stop and consider if we're using enough visuals to support our kids. Maybe it's worth trying some visuals again if you've tried them in the past but they weren't successful. We want to try to visualize the routine somewhere, such as on a whiteboard or maybe a checklist or a calendar. And as I always say, make sure that you're putting sensory activities in the routine proactively and not waiting until your child is overstimulated or hyperactive before giving them a try. We also want to make sure that each day we're putting preferred activities in the schedule. And of course, I'm not going to recommend using punishments like taking away those preferred activities when your kid has a behavior. Because one, punishments often lead to immediate stress and behaviors at a time when we're all confined at home and more stressed. And two, punishments don't teach the underlying skills that lead to challenging behaviors in the first place. It really isn't clear yet how long social distancing or isolation is going to be in our lives, so it makes sense that many parents are wondering how they're going to keep up with schooling. The first thing I want to say is that if trying to get your kid to do schoolwork is going to ruin your life, don't do school. If the school tells you that online schooling is now an expectation, but trying to get your kid to do schoolwork is going to ruin your life, don't do school. If your kid is on an IEP and the school tells you that online schooling is now an expectation, but trying to get your kid to do schoolwork is going to ruin your life, call an IEP meeting. The I in IEP stands for individualized, and school causing your kid to stress out to near crisis level proportions while being forced to stay at home is an individualized aspect of their education that needs to be addressed and accommodated. Now, that being said, a lot of kids are fine with doing some school at home, and school activities are things to do during a time where we need things to do and things to provide a little bit of structure. But we want to make sure that we're going beyond worksheets or videos that strictly teach academic things. I know it sounds cliche, but learning is all around us. So many families are also working on life skills, which are practical skills that are good for most people to eventually learn. Depending on what's appropriate for your child and their developmental level, you can take the opportunity to practice skills or situations that you want them to be prepared for. And we're not just talking about things like advanced cleaning skills so they can be more helpful around the house, but things like gardening, art, social situations, stranger awareness, first aid, or maybe cooking. As one parent told me, this whole situation is a potential teaching moment. We're all stuck at home, none of us have a choice, and so now we have to use skills and flexibility and executive functioning that are tough for our kids to use in their everyday life, home and out there. We want to talk to them about how the situation is practiced for everyone in being flexible and trying new things and in becoming more resilient. Regardless of what your specific situation looks like, I hope you all know that I'm thinking about you. Please take care of yourselves and remember that we're all in this together.